Well, the search for deals is leading a lot of people to a service called AirBnB.
I'm so interested to hear more about this. Consumer reporter Steve Noviello takes a look at some of the hot destinations, plus what you should know before you go.
It is a whole new way to stay all the comforts of your home in someone else's. You might want to skip the hotel this summer when you Airbnb. Chip Conley is head of global hospitality. Tell me about the concept here. Pretty new to some people.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be with you. So Airbnb actually took an idea that's been going on for centuries. People have opened their homes for others, strangers and friends, for years. But what we've allowed us to do with technology is to allow hosts to basically say, I've got an extra bedroom, I've got an extra home, and open it up for guests, and guests can go search around the world from over 600,000 listings in 192 countries.
You know, we've heard of things like home swap before. The thing I like about Airbnb is I don't necessarily have to give up my own home in order to rent someone else's. It's not a swap exchange, right?
It's not an exchange, because that can sometimes feel like, well, am I going to get something that's equal value? No, it has nothing to do with that. You pay a price to stay in this home or an apartment. But the nice thing is it's usually 30, 40, 50% less than staying in a hotel, and you get more space.
Yeah, you know, and speaking of hotels, I think it's important to understand for folks, these are not necessarily all the amenities that you might be used to in a hotel. I mean, no one's going to bring you coffee in the morning, perhaps, if you're renting somebody's home. You want to check those things,
well,
right?
You know, it depends. You're absolutely right. It's not exactly like a hotel. There are some Airbnb listings that include breakfast, and that's great. And the other thing is that you get to know your host, and quite often we turn strangers into friends.
What's the best way to really maximize the experience here? I mean, do you ask, I'm imagining you ask a bunch of questions up front. You know, if you go to a hotel and the room isn't quite what you thought, maybe they give you another room. Here, you're not going to get a different house.
No, you can. Actually, we have 24-hour customer service 7 days a week across the globe. So if you have a problem, we actually immediately get you to a different accommodation somewhere else in the same area.
You know, one of the things that I love about this whole concept is because you do have that conversation with your host ahead of time, it also kind of gives you the inside edge on where are the best local restaurants and nightclubs and all of that kind of stuff that you might not get from the concierge at a hotel.
That's exactly right, Steve. The thing that really keeps bringing people back to Airbnb is not just lower prices and more space, but the fact that they feel like they can live like a local. They go and stay in a place, and quite often they're staying in a neighborhood that's a residential neighborhood, and they get to know the local cafes, restaurants, boutiques, etc. And their host, once the host gets to know a little bit about them, can actually make recommendations of places that they can go.
All right, let's break it down for folks. Top 5 destinations this summer on Airbnb, because you guys have tons of listings. There are some really cool places to stay.
Yes, well, the fastest growing destinations this summer are Nashville's #1. It's the fastest growing destination in the United States on Airbnb. New Orleans is #2, not too far from you. #3 is Palm Springs, California. #4 on the opposite coast is Portland, Maine. And #5 is back to the West Coast, Santa Barbara, California. So what we're seeing is that more and more of the popular destinations aren't just New York and San Francisco and LA, but they're actually some of the smaller cities and resort destinations in the United States.
All right, let's talk about that real quick since you brought it up. A lot of folks might say, I think I've heard of this. I've heard the headlines. There's problems in places like New York using Airbnb. Kind of dispel the myths here for me. What do people need to know when renting in that city?
We have more business today than we did a year ago in New York. So we are trying to actually work with the local authorities there about how the regulations work with Airbnb, but it's still legal. You can go and stay in anywhere in New York in an Airbnb, and it's actually our most popular destination.
All righty, Airbnb open for business in New York and at tons of destinations around the world. We have a link right now on our station website, myfoxdfw.com.